In the heart of Siberia, in the frozen desert of Yamal, the Earth suddenly split open. Giant, perfectly round chasms appeared out of nowhere, leaving scientists baffled. What is it? Traces of meteorite falls? The result of secret weapons testing? Or a message from extraterrestrial civilizations? Indigenous peoples speak of the breath of evil spirits, while conspiracy theorists talk of a plot to change the planet's climate. We are going to the epicenter of the mystery to separate fact from fiction and understand what dire warning the permafrost is sending us. If you liked our analysis and want to see more investigations like this, be sure to subscribe to the channel and like the video. And in the comments, write which version you believe. Do you think the Yamal craters are a purely natural phenomenon, albeit a threatening one, or are they the result of secret technologies and someone's evil intentions? Let's discuss it. The Yamal permafrost has become a symbol of the mysterious northern landscapes, with its endless expanses and severe cold that has gripped these lands for centuries. Here, among the icy expanses, were located ancient hunting grounds, shamanic altars, and settlements whose names are still remembered by local residents: Salakard, Nirminga, Labitnangu. These places are guarded by eternal winds carrying strange sounds mixed with the voices of the tundra. Yamal, a peninsula whose name translates as the edge of the earth, has long been of interest to researchers and travelers. Its white nights, icy rivers, and lakes paint a picture of silence, which seems to hide something more than just natural mystery. Scientific expeditions in recent years have made it the center of attention. It is here that giant craters have begun to appear, whose origin has puzzled both experts and lovers of mysticism. When the permafrost begins to thaw, the structure of the soil changes. Cracks appear that can swallow entire trees or components of old shamanic stones. Sometimes artifacts appear on the surface, preserving the memory of a distant era. Bone fragments, pieces of ancient jewelry, stone tools. All of this is evidence of a long-ago life that has now become the backdrop for new mysteries. The Yamal lands are famous for their unpredictable nature. Spring comes unexpectedly. Ice drifts turn rivers into raging torrents, and in winter, the sky freezes with emerald glints. This is a zone of eternal cold, but even it is changing. In recent years, these latitudes have seen an abnormal rise in temperature, and snowdrifts are retreating earlier than usual. Before the eyes of local residents, slopes are disappearing, new lakes are forming, and rumors are circulating about a strange hum rising from the ground. What secret does this harsh land hold? Why do inexplicable natural phenomena appear here? Yamal repeatedly challenges science and imagination to unravel the mysteries that lie beneath the Earth's surface. The only question that remains is whether the permafrost hides something more than we currently imagine. The first discovery of a giant crater on Yamal occurred in the summer of 2014 and was completely accidental. Pilots of a helicopter servicing gas fields were flying over the Bovanenkovo field when they noticed something that stood out from the familiar landscape. Amidst the endless tundra, where every hill and ravine was familiar to them, there was a huge, almost perfectly round hole in the ground. Its dark mouth contrasted sharply with the light surface of the permafrost, creating the impression that some unknown force had broken through the Earth's crust from within. The pilot's initial reaction was a mixture of shock and disbelief. They circled the object several times, trying to assess its size and understand what it could be. The earth around the crater had been thrown outwards, forming a ring-shaped embankment, as if after a powerful explosion. But there were no signs of fire, debris, or other indications of a man-made disaster. It was something completely different, frightening in its inexplicability. News of the discovery quickly spread among industry workers, and then, thanks to footage taken from the helicopter, made its way onto the internet. Videos and photos of the Yamal crater instantly went viral, sparking a flurry of discussion around the world. The public was intrigued and frightened. What was it? A meteorite strike? Alien mischief? A secret weapons test? Theories multiplied at an incredible speed, each more fantastic than the last. The scientific community was initially skeptical about the information. Many scientists believed that it was either fake or a greatly exaggerated description of a common thermokarst collapse, a phenomenon quite common in permafrost regions. However, the quality of the photographs and eyewitness accounts forced them to change their minds. It became clear that the world was facing a new, previously undescribed natural phenomenon. The scale of the phenomenon became clearer when reports of new discoveries soon followed. Similar craters were discovered in other areas of the Yamal Autonomous Okrug, and then on the Taimyr Peninsula. One crater, then another, then a third. It became clear that this was not an isolated incident, but a whole series of mysterious events. The craters appeared suddenly, as if out of nowhere, leaving scientists completely baffled. Each new crater raised more questions than it answered. They varied in size but had a similar structure. A deep shaft, with almost vertical walls, and a ring of earth thrown up around the edge. This pointed to a single formation mechanism which remained a complete mystery. Local residents, the indigenous peoples of the north, told ancient legends about the breath of the earth and fire dragons living under the permafrost, which sometimes break through to the surface. Could these ancient tales be echoes of real events that happened in the past? Or were they simply trying to explain something beyond human understanding? The mystery of the Yamal craters was just beginning to unfold, and the first steps in its study promised to be full of difficulties and unexpected discoveries. What force could be capable of tearing millions of cubic meters of soil from the icy depths with such power, leaving behind these eerie scars on the face of the planet? Was it nature's warning of impending cataclysms, or were we faced with traces of something that did not yet fit into any scientific paradigm? The answers to these questions were yet to be found, delving deeper and deeper into the icy heart of Yamal. When the first explorers reached the Yamal craters, they were greeted by a sight that exceeded all expectations and the wildest assumptions made from aerial photographs. Standing on the edge of the abyss, one felt like a grain of sand in the face of inexplicable power. The diameter of the craters varied from 20 to 60 meters, and their depth, according to initial estimates, reached 70 meters. A 20-story building could easily fit into such a shaft. The edges were incredibly fragile, consisting of loose soil and pieces of ice, and constantly crumbled, making it deadly dangerous to approach the crater. That is why the first measurements were taken with great caution, using mountaineering equipment and remote methods. The internal structure of the funnel was striking in its geometry. It was not just a cone-shaped hole, but an almost perfect cylindrical well with nearly vertical walls. These walls were a cross-section of permafrost, exposing layers of ice and frozen soil that had accumulated over millennia. In the sun, the ice took on a bluish tint, creating a surreal picture of an icy underground. At the bottom of the well, as far as the eye could see, dark, murky water mixed with mud and rock debris splashed. Its level was gradually rising, indicating that the ice was continuing to melt. Around each crater, a ring-shaped embankment, or parapet, consisting of ejected soil stretched for tens of meters. Earth, clay, sand, and huge chunks of ice were scattered, as if a powerful explosion had occurred in the center. The volume of ejected rock was enormous, thousands of cubic meters. This fact immediately ruled out theories of a simple collapse or landslide. A collapse implies that the soil settled downward, but here everything indicated that some force had pushed it out of the bowels of the earth with enormous energy. Moreover, the ejection was directed strictly upward, not sideways, which added to the mystery of the explosion mechanism. Scientists who descended into the craters described unusual sensations. The air at the bottom was different. There were elevated levels of methane and other gases. It was dangerous, but at the same time, it provided the first serious clue. What if it was the gas accumulated under the permafrost that caused these colossal emissions? But the most striking thing was that these giant geological formations were short-lived. Time was working against the researchers. Under the influence of summer heat and sunlight, the icy walls of the craters began to melt rapidly. The edges collapsed, expanding the diameter of the funnel, but at the same time reducing its depth. Within a few years of active melting, the funnel was completely filled with water, turning into a new, unremarkable tundra lake. The original unique structure disappeared forever, taking with it the keys to the mystery. This race against time forced the expeditions to work at their limits in order to collect as much data as possible before nature covered its tracks. Thus, the structure of the funnels spoke volumes about the suddenness, the colossal energy released from under the ground, and the dynamism of the process itself. But the main question remained unanswered. What force, locked in the icy prison of permafrost, could have accumulated enough power for such a devastating breakthrough? Was it natural gas, or was there something completely different behind it, as yet unknown to science? The main scientific theory about the formation of the Yamal craters appeared almost immediately after their discovery and was based on the most obvious fact: the abnormally high concentration of methane in the air at the bottom of the craters. Scientists from the Earth's Cryosphere Institute and other research centers put forward a hypothesis that is now considered the leading one. According to this version, the culprit is so-called gas hydrates, or methane clathrates. These are compounds of gas and water that form a solid, ice-like substance at low temperatures and high pressure. For thousands of years, permafrost served as an ideal prison for huge reserves of such methane ice, keeping it in a stable state. However, in recent decades, the climate in the Arctic has begun to change rapidly. The rise in average annual temperatures has caused the permafrost to thaw not only on the surface, but also from within, especially in areas of geological faults or under ancient riverbeds. According to scientists, this process has become the trigger. When the temperature and pressure reach a critical point, frozen methane hydrate turns into a gaseous state. This process is called dissociation and is explosive in nature. 1 cubic meter of gas hydrate can release up to 160 cubic meters of pure methane. In a confined space under a layer of frozen soil, the gas begins to accumulate, creating enormous pressure. According to one model, this process leads to the formation of a subsurface mound, known in Yakutia as a bulgunyak, and in science as a pingo. This hill grows, the ground above it bulges until the internal pressure exceeds the strength of the frozen cap. At this moment, a powerful pneumatic explosion occurs. Gas bursts to the surface with tremendous force, throwing tons of ice and frozen soil upward and sideways. This explains the presence of a ring-shaped embankment around the crater and its almost perfect cylindrical shape. The energy of such an explosion is comparable to the explosion of several tons of TNT. This theory elegantly explains the key features of the craters: their sudden appearance, traces of a powerful ejection of rock from within, and a high concentration of methane. Ice samples taken from the walls of the craters also confirmed the presence of hydrates in them. However, even this seemingly coherent theory has its weaknesses, which give skeptics pause. First, why have these explosions begun to occur en masse in recent years? After all, warming in the Arctic is not a new process. Second, why do some craters have an almost perfect circular shape, which is not always characteristic of natural explosions? And finally, are there any additional factors that science is currently overlooking? Some researchers believe that the melting of permafrost alone is not enough. Perhaps the process is triggered by heat coming from deep faults in the Earth's crust. This means that the problem may be much more complex and related not only to the climate, but also to the planet's geological activity. Thus, although the gas theory is the main one, it leaves room for doubt and alternative hypotheses. Are we really dealing with a purely natural phenomenon, albeit a formidable one? Or is methane just the tip of the iceberg, with the real cause hidden much deeper, in the icy and dark depths of Yamal? Long before scientists began to construct their hypotheses, the indigenous peoples of the north, the Nenets, Khanty, and Selkups, already had their own explanations for such phenomena. Their world is permeated with myths and legends, where nature is a living, animated being, and the line between the visible and invisible worlds is thin and permeable. There is no room for chance in their folklore. Every event, from the changing of the seasons to the falling of a star, has a deep meaning and is a message from the spirits. The appearance of giant holes in the ground fits perfectly into this worldview. In the legends of the Nenets, the indigenous people of Yamal, the earth is not just the ground beneath their feet. The lower world, Nya, is the abode of powerful and sometimes hostile spirits. It is believed that sometimes the earth opens its mouth to release these spirits, or, conversely, to take something from the human world. Such places have been considered sacred and dangerous since ancient times. Shamans performed their rituals there, trying to appease the spirits, while ordinary hunters and reindeer herders were instructed to avoid them. There is a legend about the Sikirtia, or Sirtia, a mythical tribe that, according to legend, lived in Yamal before the arrival of the Nenets. They were small in stature, possessed supernatural abilities, lived underground, and only came to the surface at night. According to myths, the Sikirtia went underground when the real people arrived and still live in underground cities, grazing their mammoths. Some elders associate the appearance of sinkholes with the Sikirtia. Perhaps these are entrances to their underground world that have accidentally opened, Or perhaps it is the wrath of the underground people, disturbed by human activity, drilling wells, laying gas pipelines. Another group of legends speaks of the breath of the earth. Old people say that the tundra sometimes begins to hum and tremble, and then a pillar of fire and smoke bursts from its depths. They believe that this is the earth itself getting rid of the disease or evil energy that has accumulated inside it. Such stories have been passed down from generation to generation, and for modern nenettes, the appearance of craters is only a confirmation of the ancient knowledge of their ancestors. They see this as a dire warning. The spirits of the earth are dissatisfied with how humans treat nature and send signs that cannot be ignored. For them, this is not a scientific mystery, but a question of spiritual balance. Interestingly, some details of the myths strikingly echo scientific data. Legends about fiery emissions may well be a folk interpretation of methane ignition escaping from a crater. And stories about underground rumblings correspond to the seismic vibrations that must precede such a powerful explosion. Could ancient peoples have witnessed such phenomena in the past and recorded them in their mythology? If so, then the Yamal craters are not a unique phenomenon of the 21st century, but a cyclical process that repeats itself every 100 or 1,000 years. Perhaps these ancient legends, which scientists often dismiss as superstition, hold the key to understanding the true nature and periodicity of this frightening phenomenon. What if shamans knew more than modern geologists and were trying to warn us about forces we are only beginning to discover? Are these craters portals not to the spirit world, but to our own past, preserving the memory of forgotten cataclysms? While myths offer a spiritual explanation, science seeks material causes, and global climate change is increasingly cited as the main one. The Arctic is the weather kitchen of the entire planet, and, at the same time, its most vulnerable point. Here, warming processes are proceeding 2 or even 3 times faster than the global average. This phenomenon, known as Arctic amplification, triggers a chain reaction, the consequences of which we observe in the form of giant craters. The permafrost that has bound the northern lands for millennia is essentially a giant natural refrigerator. In some areas of Yamal, it is up to 500 meters thick. This icy shell contains not only enormous reserves of fresh water, but also a huge amount of organic material, the remains of plants and animals that have not decomposed due to the low temperature. Scientists estimate that twice as much carbon is preserved in the permafrost as is contained in the entire Earth's atmosphere. As long as this refrigerator is working, the system is in equilibrium. But as soon as the temperature starts to rise, the ice shackles weaken. The melting or degradation of permafrost is a time bomb. And the Yamal craters, according to many climatologists, are the first clicks of its timer. The process acts as a catalyst for the gas theory. Rising temperatures destabilize methane hydrates trapped in the permafrost. But this is not the only mechanism. The melting of organic matter that has been frozen for millennia triggers microbial activity. These microorganisms begin to actively decompose organic material, releasing methane and carbon dioxide. Thus, new biogenic methane is added to the old methane from gas hydrates. This creates additional pressure points underground, which can lead to the same explosive consequences. A vicious circle is formed, which climatologists call positive feedback. Methane emissions from the crater enhance the greenhouse effect. Methane is dozens of times more potent as a greenhouse gas than CO2, although it lives in the atmosphere for less time. The intensification of the greenhouse effect leads to further warming in the Arctic. This, in turn, causes even more permafrost to melt and new methane emissions. The planet begins to heat itself up, and this process may become irreversible. In this concept, the Yamal sinkholes are not just a local phenomenon, but a dangerous symptom of a global disease. They are a vivid demonstration of how previously hidden forces of nature are being unleashed under the influence of human activity. Each new crater is not just a hole in the ground, but an open tap from which powerful greenhouse gases are pouring into the atmosphere. Scientists are trying to estimate the scale of these emissions, but this is extremely difficult. The craters appear spontaneously and quickly fill with water, hiding any traces. But even rough estimates show that if this process becomes widespread throughout the Arctic, it could dramatically accelerate climate change across the entire planet. Thus, looking through the prism of climatology transforms the Yamal mystery from a local geological curiosity into a problem of global scale. Are these craters the first act of a drama whose finale will affect every inhabitant of Earth? And do we still have time to prevent disaster, or has the mechanism of self-destruction already been set in motion, and we are merely powerless witnesses to its work? Although the gas theory, reinforced by the climate change factor, seems most convincing, a number of scientists point to details that do not fit into this simple scheme. They suggest taking a broader view of the problem and considering alternative geological processes that could lead to the formation of craters, or at least play a significant role in this. One such alternative is the theory of cryovolcanism. Cryovolcanoes are volcanoes that erupt not hot magma, but volatile substances such as water, ammonia, or methane in a liquid or gaseous state. This phenomenon is well known on the icy moons of giant planets such as Enceladus or Triton. Some researchers wonder whether similar processes could occur on Earth in permafrost conditions. According to this hypothesis, there may be lenses of salt water under the permafrost that remain liquid even at sub-zero temperatures. Under the influence of the Earth's deep heat or tectonic pressure, this water can be forced upward with tremendous force, breaking through the ice shell and forming a crater. This version is supported by the fact that water with a high degree of mineralization has been found at the bottom of some craters. Another alternative version links the appearance of craters not to gas trapped in the permafrost itself, but to deeper processes, degassing of the subsoil. The Yamal Peninsula, like the rest of western Siberia, is a giant sedimentary basin containing the world's largest natural gas deposits. Perhaps the craters are outlets to the surface of deep faults in the Earth's crust, through which gas from deposits lying at a depth of several kilometers finds its way to the surface. In this case, the thawing of the permafrost is only the last barrier, the weakening of which allows the deep gas to escape. This theory explains the enormous energy of the explosions, since the gas pressure in deep layers is incomparably higher than in near-surface hydrates. It also explains why craters appear in certain places, possibly along tectonic fault lines. There is also a more complex, comprehensive model that combines several factors. Its proponents believe that it is impossible to reduce everything to a single cause. In their opinion, the formation of a crater is the result of a perfect storm, a coincidence of several conditions at a single point. For example, the presence of a subsurface gas hydrate lens located above an active geological fault, through which additional heat and deep gas are supplied. And all this is happening in the context of global warming, which weakens the strength of the permafrost cap. This synergistic effect could explain the enormous power of the explosion, its location, and its suddenness. These alternative theories do not yet have as much evidence to support them as the main gas hypothesis, but they are encouraging scientists to continue their search. Perhaps different craters were formed in different ways, and there is simply no single mechanism. Each of them may be a unique geological event with its own set of causes. Thus, the scientific world is far from reaching a consensus. This uncertainty and the presence of blank spots in knowledge create fertile ground not only for further research, but also for the most daring assumptions. If even scientists cannot agree, does this mean that we are faced with something that goes beyond existing geological models? What if the real reason is so unusual that the scientific community is simply afraid to voice it? The mystery of the Yamal craters has captivated the scientific world from the very beginning, and scientific expeditions began to be sent to the harsh Arctic region, one after another. Working in these conditions is a real challenge. The short polar summer, when research is possible, lasts only a couple of months. The lack of roads, swarms of gnats, unpredictable weather, and the constant threat of encounters with wild animals, such as polar bears, make every trip into the field a risky undertaking. But the thirst for knowledge and the desire to unravel the mystery proved stronger than the difficulties. The first expeditions, organized by Russian research centers such as the Institute of Earth Cryosphere of the Siberian branch of the Russian Academy of Sciences and the Arctic Research Center, set themselves the task of reaching the sites, conducting reconnaissance, and taking the first samples. Even then, it was clear how dangerous this research was. The edges of the craters were extremely unstable. It was necessary to approach them with mountaineering safety equipment. The first descent of a person into the crater was a real feat. Scientist Vladimir Pushkarev, secured with ropes, descended into the icy abyss to take samples from the walls and measure the gas composition of the atmosphere at the bottom. This provided invaluable data that could not be collected remotely. In the future, the research methodology became increasingly sophisticated. Scientists used unmanned aerial vehicles, drones, to take detailed photos and videos of the craters, create three-dimensional models of them, and monitor changes over time. This made it possible to safely study the dynamics of wall collapse and ice melting. Geophysical methods such as seismic exploration and electrical tomography were used to study the deep structure beneath the craters. These technologies allow us to see through the ground and observe the structure of frozen rocks tens of meters deep, as well as detect cavities, faults, or lenses of thawed soil. One of the main tasks was drilling. Special drilling rigs made it possible to extract cores, columns of frozen soil and ice, from the walls and bottom of the crater, as well as from the untouched tundra around it. Analysis of these cores in the laboratory provided information about the composition of the gas, the age of the ice, the presence of organic remains, and much more. It was like reading the planet's icy chronicle, page by page, delving into its past. Each expedition brought new discoveries and new mysteries. For example, ice samples revealed so-called cryopegs, layers of unfrozen salt water, which added fuel to the fire of debate about the role of groundwater. In addition to methane, other hydrocarbons were found in the gas composition, which could indicate its deep rather than biogenic origin. But perhaps the most intriguing finding was the strange isotopic signatures in some samples. The ratio of stable carbon isotopes in methane can indicate its source: biogenic from microbes or thermogenic from the depths. In some cases, these signatures were unusual and did not quite fit into standard models. What did this mean? Was it some kind of mixed gas? Or were there unknown chemical reactions involved in its formation? Scientific expeditions continue to this day. Researchers from all over the world are eager to get to Yamal to contribute to solving this mystery. But time is running out. The craters are rapidly deteriorating, turning into lakes, and each new lake is a lost opportunity to look into the bowels of the earth. Despite all the efforts and advanced technologies, there is still no definitive answer. Every piece of data collected only raises new questions. Has nature created a puzzle that the human mind is not yet able to solve? Or are scientists going around in circles, while the key to the mystery lies in a completely different plane, beyond the boundaries of traditional science? Where strict scientific facts end, the territory of mysticism and inexplicable phenomena begins. And the history of the Yamal craters is literally permeated with them. These events, which scientists usually dismiss as fabrications or coincidences, are proof for many that there is more to the appearance of the craters than just geology and chemistry. Immediately after the discovery of the first craters, local residents, reindeer herders, and hunters began to share their strange observations. Some of them claimed that a few days or even hours before the supposed appearance of the sinkhole, they saw bright flashes or hovering glowing balls in the sky in that area. These objects did not resemble airplanes or helicopters. They moved silently and then either disappeared abruptly or shot upward at incredible speed. Could these unidentified flying objects have been somehow connected to the subsequent explosions? Another category of reports concerns anomalous sounds. People whose camps were located dozens of kilometers from the future craters reported a low-frequency hum that seemed to come from underground. It was not loud, but it was pervasive, causing people and animals to feel an inexplicable sense of anxiety. Deer became restless, dogs howled, and people felt vibrations throughout their bodies. This hum could last from several hours to a day, and then suddenly stop. Shortly thereafter, news would arrive about the discovery of a new hole in the ground. Animal behavior is another layer of mysterious phenomena. Reindeer herders noticed that their herds instinctively avoided areas where sinkholes later formed. The animals, as if sensing danger, changed their usual migration routes, bypassing these places by many kilometers. Even birds, according to eyewitnesses, stopped nesting near these areas. It was as if some invisible force had created a dead zone around the future craters, which was sensed by all living creatures except humans. With the appearance of the craters, these places did not cease to be anomalous. Travelers and researchers who visited the sinkholes reported strange malfunctions in their electronic devices. Compasses began to spin erratically, GPS navigators lost their signal or showed incorrect coordinates, and the batteries of cameras and video cameras discharged in a matter of minutes, even when fully charged. Of course, there are rational explanations for these phenomena. The flashes in the sky are fireballs or atmospheric phenomena. The rumbling is seismic precursors, The malfunctions in electronics are the influence of magnetic anomalies characteristic of certain areas. But when all these events come together in a single picture associated with specific locations, it becomes more difficult to ignore them. Esotericists and psychics, who have also flocked to Yamal, unanimously claim that the craters are powerful geopathogenic zones or even portals. According to them, these places emit not only gas, but also a kind of subtle energy from the bowels of the planet. They claim that these are places of power capable of influencing human consciousness and physical condition. Some people feel a surge of energy there, while others feel a decline in strength and causeless fear. What if science, in its quest to measure and weigh everything, overlooks a whole layer of reality? What if animals and people with heightened intuition are really capable of sensing what instruments cannot detect? Perhaps the mystical events surrounding the craters are not just folklore, but important clues pointing to the true, multidimensional nature of this phenomenon. Are these holes in the ground not only rifts in the Earth's crust, but also in the fabric of our familiar reality? The more mysteries surrounded the Yamal craters, the more dark rumors and conspiracy theories arose. Gradually, they moved from the category of geological anomalies to the category of places associated with danger and disappearances. Although there were no officially confirmed cases of people dying directly as a result of the formation of the sinkhole, chilling stories began to circulate in local folklore and online communities. They told of lone hunters or reindeer herders who went into the tundra and never returned. Usually, the search for them led nowhere, and their disappearance was attributed to the harsh conditions of the north, where it is common to get lost or fall prey to wild animals. However, when the routes of the missing people ran close to areas where craters were later discovered, the rumors gained new momentum. A theory emerged that people could have been direct victims of an explosion, and their bodies were either buried under tons of ejected rock or fell to the bottom of the resulting abyss. It was virtually impossible to prove or disprove this. Another category of stories concerned small research groups or tourists who allegedly went missing in these areas. There was talk of empty tents, abandoned equipment, and no signs of a struggle or panic-stricken flight. It was as if the people had simply vanished into thin air. Of course, most of these stories had no documentary evidence to back them up, and were most likely the product of popular imagination, fueled by the general atmosphere of mystery. However, they created an aura of notoriety around the craters, turning them into a kind of Siberian Bermuda Triangle. Some conspiracy theories claimed that the disappearances were real, but that the information was being carefully concealed by the authorities and special services. Why? To avoid causing panic and attracting unnecessary attention to these areas. Perhaps the authorities knew the true nature of the craters, and this nature was so terrifying or secret that it had to be protected at the cost of concealing the truth about the tragedies. For example, if the craters were the result of testing some new weapon, the death of accidental witnesses would be a highly probable and extremely undesirable event for public disclosure. Reports of strange behavior by the military in areas where new craters were discovered also fit into this pattern. Sometimes eyewitnesses noticed that immediately after the appearance of a crater, the area was cordoned off by people in military uniform who did not allow anyone to approach the object until the arrival of official scientists. What were they doing there? Were they taking measurements? Were they looking for something? Or were they covering up traces of something that outsiders should not see? These rumors, albeit unproven, made many people look at the problem from a different angle. What if the craters were not just a natural phenomenon, but an active and dangerous zone? What if the force that creates them is capable not only of moving the Earth, but also of affecting living organisms, even to the point of their complete disappearance? This idea took the mystery to a new level. It is one thing to study a geological phenomenon, but quite another to deal with a place that could be deadly dangerous. The line between a scientific problem and a thriller was becoming increasingly blurred. Are these stories just modern folklore, born of fear of the unknown? Or is there a grain of truth in all the rumors and speculation hidden from the public eye? Perhaps the most terrifying secrets of Yamal are buried not only at the bottom of icy craters, but also in folders marked Top Secret. When rational and even mystical explanations seem insufficient, the boldest and most popular theory in popular culture comes to the fore: the theory of extraterrestrial intervention. For its supporters, the Yamal craters are nothing less than direct evidence of the presence and activity of alien civilizations on our planet. And this seemingly fantastical version has its own, albeit peculiar, logic. The main argument of ufologists is the shape. Many of the craters have an almost perfect circular geometry, which, in their opinion, is rarely found in natural geological formations. Such a shape suggests an artificial origin, the result of the application of some technology. A natural gas explosion, according to their logic, would most likely create a funnel with an irregular, jagged shape. A perfect circle is a sign of a precise, targeted impact. What could it have been? Opinions vary. The simplest is that they are traces of the landing or takeoff of alien spacecraft. Perhaps massive aircraft land in the uninhabited tundra, and their engines, operating on principles unknown to us, either melt the permafrost or cause a local explosion. Or perhaps the ships take off from under the ice, where their bases may be located, and the craters are simply exhaust ports. Another, more complex version suggests that these are not traces of landing, but the result of some kind of ray weapon or tool. Aliens may be exploring the subsoil or extracting rare elements found under the permafrost. To do this, they use an energy beam that drills into the ground with tremendous speed and precision, leaving behind perfectly smooth holes. The ejection of soil and gas in this case is only a side effect of this high-tech drilling. In favor of this theory, there is the aforementioned evidence of strange flashes and luminous objects in the sky, which were allegedly observed before the appearance of the craters. Ufologists interpret these events unequivocally. These were the very ships or probes that created the craters. Their appearance and disappearance is a direct indication of extraterrestrial activity. The conspiracy theory goes even further. It claims that the governments of leading countries, primarily Russia and the United States, are well aware of what is happening. They know that there are alien bases or resource extraction operations in Yamal and other remote areas of the Arctic. According to this version, scientific expeditions are just a cover. In reality, special forces are sent to these areas under the guise of geologists and climatologists whose task is either to make contact or to secretly observe the activities of the aliens and, if possible, obtain their technology. In this context, the gas theory is seen as a cover-up, a convenient and scientific-sounding explanation fed to the public to hide an uncomfortable and shocking truth. After all, Acknowledging the presence of aliens would cause global panic and turn the foundations of human civilization upside down. Of course, there is no direct evidence for this theory. There are no shipwrecks or extraterrestrial artifacts. It is based entirely on circumstantial evidence, speculation, and the belief that we are not alone in the universe. But it has enormous appeal because it offers a simple and comprehensive answer to a complex mystery. It turns boring geology into an exciting space thriller. Could it be true? Logic and science say no. But as long as the mystery of the Yamal craters remains unsolved, as long as questions remain unanswered, there will always be a small what if. What if one day, instead of a methane bubble, something completely different rises from the bottom of another icy lake, forcing all of humanity to take a fresh look at the starry sky? Another popular branch of conspiracy theory takes us not into space, but into the recent past, to the days of the Cold War. According to this theory, the Yamal craters are an ominous echo of secret Soviet programs, the reverberations of which reach us decades later. During the Soviet era, Siberia and the far north were a giant laboratory and testing ground, where the most ambitious and sometimes dangerous projects were carried out in conditions of strict secrecy. Many of them were related to underground work. One version directly links the craters to the Peaceful Nuclear Explosions program. From the 1960s to the 1980s, more than 120 nuclear explosions were carried out in the USSR for non-military purposes, to create underground gas storage facilities, for deep seismic sounding, to extinguish burning gas fountains, and even to build canals. Some of these explosions were carried out in northern western Siberia. The theory suggests that these powerful underground tremors could have disrupted the geological structure of the region. They could have created a system of cracks and weakened areas in the permafrost and underlying rocks. And now, decades later, these scars are making themselves felt. Perhaps deep gas is finding its way to the surface through these cracks. Or perhaps the disrupted structure of the permafrost has become more vulnerable to melting. In this case, the craters are long-term, delayed consequences of nuclear tests that Soviet engineers may not have been aware of. Another, even more sinister theory concerns the possible existence of secret underground facilities. During the Cold War, both superpowers built deep underground bunkers for command centers, factories, strategic raw material storage facilities, and possibly chemical or biological weapons storage facilities. The Yamal Peninsula, with its desolation and harsh climate, would have been an ideal place to hide such facilities. What if the craters are the result of accidents at these long-abandoned and forgotten facilities? Corrosion, geological shifts, or thawing permafrost could have led to the depressurization of containers with hazardous substances. A chemical reaction or detonation. And there you have it, a powerful emission that modern science attributes to natural gas. This version explains both the secrecy of the authorities and the cordoning off of areas by the military. If components of chemical warfare agents or anthrax spores escape to the surface, the primary task would not be scientific research, but ensuring radiation, chemical, and biological safety, and concealing the very fact of the disaster. There is also a theory about secret weapons. Perhaps during the Soviet era, geophysical or tectonic weapons capable of causing local earthquakes or explosions were being developed. And the craters are either traces of its testing or the result of uncontrolled detonation of charges laid at that time. All these theories have one thing in common. They assume that the government knows the truth, but is hiding it. They appeal to the image of an evil empire or a totalitarian state capable of any experiments without regard for the consequences. As in the case of aliens, there is virtually no evidence. The archives of those years are still classified. But these versions fit perfectly with the soil of distrust of the authorities and fear of hidden threats from the past. They turn Yamal into a minefield left to us as a legacy of a bygone era. What if there really are time bombs ticking under the icy shell of the tundra, planted half a century ago? And what if the current craters are just the first, relatively harmless explosions before something much larger and more terrifying? This idea is no less frightening than hypothetical alien ships. When individual conspiracy theories seem too small to explain such a large-scale phenomenon, meta-conspiracy theories emerge, tying all the threads together into one global knot. In this worldview, the Yamal craters are not a coincidence, a natural phenomenon, or a legacy of the past. They are part of a sinister plan being implemented right now by some powerful shadow group, whether it be a world government, a secret society like the Illuminati, or a clique of super-rich corporations. And the goal of this plan is nothing less than the restructuring of the world. According to this mega-theory, methane emissions from the craters are not a side effect. They are the main goal. A certain group of people is interested in a sharp and accelerated change in climate. Why? The reasons may vary. First, economic ones. The melting of Arctic ice opens the northern sea route for year-round navigation, which promises fabulous profits. It also makes huge reserves of oil, gas, and other minerals, currently trapped under the ice, accessible for extraction. Whoever controls this process will gain control over the resources of the future. Second, geopolitical. Global warming will lead to the flooding of coastal cities, droughts, famine, and mass migration. This will cause chaos and destabilization in some regions and strengthen the position of others that are more protected. It is a tool for global power redistribution, capable of bringing entire countries to their knees without a single shot being fired. How exactly are these explosions caused? Proponents of this theory point to projects such as the American HAARP, High-Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. Officially, it is a complex for studying the ionosphere, but conspiracy theorists are convinced that it is actually a climate weapon. In their opinion, powerful directed beams of electromagnetic radiation are capable of heating certain areas of the Earth's surface or subsoil, causing permafrost to melt and destabilizing gas hydrates. According to this logic, the Yamal craters are the result of targeted strikes by such weapons. They appear where and when they are needed to maintain the necessary rate of methane emissions into the atmosphere. It is a controlled process. The official scientific version about natural thawing is just a smokescreen designed to lull humanity into complacency, while a monstrous plan is being carried out behind its back. Scientists who promote this version are either sincerely mistaken or are bribed agents of influence. This theory explains everything: the suddenness, the strange geography, and the possible secrecy of the authorities, who may either be in collusion or powerless against the might of the shadow government. It turns scientists, the military, and even aliens into pawns in a big game, the true rules of which are known only to the select few. The evidence base for such a theory is practically zero, and is based on the principle of qui prodest, who benefits. It takes real facts, the melting of the Arctic, the existence of the Harpy program, and combines them into a speculative construct using conjecture and assumptions. However, its strength lies in the fact that it provides a simple explanation for a complex and frightening world. It creates an image of a specific enemy who can be blamed for all the troubles. This theory is the quintessence of modern man's fear of forces he cannot control. Global corporations, hidden technologies, geopolitical games, and the Yamal crater in this picture is not just a hole in the ground, but a wound deliberately inflicted on the planet for someone's benefit. But what if there is some truth in this paranoid picture of the world? What if technologies capable of influencing geological processes really exist and are in the wrong hands? Against the backdrop of rampant conspiracy and mystical theories, it may seem that the scientific community is unanimous in its opinion. However, this is far from the case. Behind the scenes, there is a fierce debate, with scientists from different fields and schools of thought defending their sometimes mutually exclusive points of view. This battle of ideas and interpretations shows how complex the problem really is. The main divide is between, roughly speaking, climatologists, hydrate specialists, and geologists, deep-sea specialists. The first group, which is currently in the mainstream, firmly believes that the craters are the result of the melting of near-surface gas hydrates caused by global warming. They cite data on rising temperatures, the composition of gas in the craters, and models describing the process of explosive dissociation of hydrates as evidence. For them, the Yamal phenomenon is primarily a cryolithological and climatic problem. Their opponents, geologists specializing in tectonics and oil and gas geology, consider this approach too superficial. They argue that the energy stored in near-surface hydrates may not be sufficient for such powerful explosions. Their attention is focused on deep processes. They point out that Yamal is a region with active tectonics and powerful faults through which gas from giant deposits lying several kilometers deep can migrate to the surface. In this model, the thawing of the permafrost is merely the removal of a plug, and the main engine of the explosion is located much deeper. As arguments, they cite seismic survey data indicating the presence of deep channels beneath the craters and the anomalous isotopic composition of the gas, which is more similar to deep gas than to hydrate gas. This dispute is not purely academic. The answer to the question of the source of the gas determines both the assessment of risks and the methods of forecasting them. If the climatologists are right, then the forecast should primarily involve monitoring the temperature of the permafrost and looking for areas where hydrates accumulate. If the geologists are right, then deep faults need to be mapped and seismic activity monitored. These are completely different approaches and involve different costs. In addition to this main dispute, there are other points of view. Some hydrogeologists emphasize the role of groundwater. They believe that the migration and pressure of water lenses under the permafrost may play a key role, with gas being only a secondary factor. Chemists are trying to understand the intricacies of the reactions taking place in frozen soil and suggest that previously unknown processes may be occurring there, generating explosive mixtures. Each new expedition and each new article in a scientific journal adds fuel to the fire of these disputes. The same data can be interpreted differently depending on the researcher's theoretical basis. For example, the discovery of salt water at the bottom of the crater is proof of the role of groundwater for some, and for others, it is merely the result of salt concentration during freezing. This lack of consensus, on the one hand, hinders the development of a unified strategy for action. On the other hand, it is a normal state of living science, which seeks the truth through the collision of hypotheses. But for the average person, this scientific uncertainty looks like a sign of powerlessness. If the scientists themselves cannot agree, what can an ordinary person expect from them? This situation creates ideal conditions for all kinds of alternative theories to flourish. After all, any conspiracy theory is attractive because it provides a simple, unambiguous, and understandable answer, unlike the confusing and contradictory scientific debates. Isn't this scientific division the most alarming symptom? It shows that we are faced with a phenomenon that does not fit into the framework of a single discipline and requires a completely new, comprehensive approach, which science has yet to develop. So, we have come a long way, from the accidental discovery by helicopter pilots to global conspiracy theories and deep scientific debates. The giant Yamal craters, which appeared out of the icy abyss, have become a true symbol of the mysteries of the 21st century. What do we have in the end? We are faced with a phenomenon that still has no clear and comprehensive explanation. Each of the versions considered, from the scientific to the most fantastic, has its strengths and weaknesses. The leading scientific hypothesis about the explosion of gas hydrates due to the melting of permafrost seems logical and is confirmed by many facts, such as the presence of methane and the connection with global warming. However, it cannot fully explain the perfect shape of some of the craters, the enormous energy of the explosion, or the strange accompanying phenomena. Alternative geological theories pointing to deep faults and cryovolcanism add important details to the overall picture, but so far, they do not have sufficient evidence and cannot explain why the phenomenon has manifested itself so massively right now. The myths and legends of indigenous peoples, telling of the breath of the earth and underground dwellers, strikingly echo modern discoveries. They make one wonder, perhaps these are not just superstitions, but memories of cyclical processes witnessed by the ancients, encoded in images. This is a view of the problem from the depths of centuries, which modern science is only beginning to comprehend. And finally, conspiracy theories, from alien drilling and traces of Soviet tests to a global conspiracy to change the climate. They may seem like nonsense, but their popularity is an important social symptom. It speaks to people's deep distrust of official information and their fear of hidden forces, whether government, corporations, or extraterrestrial intelligence. These theories fill the vacuum left by scientific uncertainty. The most important thing we need to understand is that the Yamal craters are not just a local geological curiosity. They are a multidimensional phenomenon at the intersection of geology, climatology, history, folklore, and even politics. Perhaps the truth is not to choose one correct theory, but to understand that they may all be fragments of one large and complex mosaic. Perhaps the climate-induced thawing of the permafrost has indeed weakened the lid under which gas from a deep fault left over from a Soviet nuclear explosion has accumulated. And all this is happening in a place that has long been considered an anomalous zone by indigenous peoples. The craters continue to appear. Each of them is a silent question posed to us by the planet itself. It is a grim reminder that beneath our feet, in the icy depths, lie forces that we do not fully understand and cannot control. The Earth is not a dead backdrop for human activity, but a living, complex, and sometimes dangerous organism. The mystery of the Yamal craters remains unsolved, and perhaps its main value lies not in the future answer, but in the question itself, which makes us look with awe and respect into the white silence of the Arctic, trying to understand what other secrets the permafrost holds. What will it show us next time?